Welcome back, Tying That Guy. I'm Wes Chatham, and this is my good friend, Franck. Say hello, Ty.
You were trying to remember my name, weren't you?
Yeah. Every episode, I'm like, who the fuck is this guy?
You were about to call me Steve Gutenberg.
I was going to call you Steve Gutenberg, and this is my good friend, Steve Gutenberg. I should have thought about that. Somebody said in the comments, which I thought was hilarious, is that we should have Terry Chen on and him host the thing and say, Ty and not that guy. I thought that was funny.
That would be good. We should do that.
You know what, Ty? I want to say something to our army of listeners, the Tying That Guy army. And I'm going to do this at the front of the episode because we usually do it at the back, right?
Okay.
And
you're going to tell them to like and subscribe now?
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say, could you support us and like and subscribe? Because our goal is to get as many people and get the numbers where it needs to be so Stephen King will come on our show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll go one step further. We'll get Ridley Scott. We'll get Harrison Ford.
We got to get big and powerful before that can happen.
Yeah, we got to get big and powerful.
Like at least a dozen fans.
Right now we might be able to get like David Hasselhoff.
Yeah. You're not getting the Hoff. Give me a break.
John Johnson. We can get the fucking Hoff.
You could not get the Hoff.
Do you think we get Don Johnson?
I would say we could have gotten Don Johnson, but he's kind of been. He was in Django Unchained. I think that reinvigorated his career a little bit.
And he was in Knives Out, so we probably couldn't get him.
Can't get him anymore.
So not David Hasselhoff. Well, the verdict's still out on David Hasselhoff. We need to reach out.
He's huge in Germany.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Our German fans love him.
Yeah.
What about Tom Selleck?
Tom Selleck he's doing that show Blue Bloods. He's busy, man. Tom Selleck he's working nonstop.
What about the guy who was the voice of Alf? I bet we can get him.
Is he still alive? I bet we could get him. Yeah.
I think we could get him. I think we have the Tying That Guy army has lifted us to a place, to a pinnacle of our success where we could get the guy who was the voice of Alf. I think we can do that.
Well, I mean, we already got a Fraggle Rock guy, so we already, we're huge in the Muppet world.
Yeah. What a pleasant surprise that episode turned out. Well, no, sorry. Sorry. Not a pleasant surprise. I knew it was going to be great talking about the Expanse, but what a pleasant surprise that we were going to be talking about Fraggle Rock.
Yeah.
Because, who would have thought that this guy was a writer on Fraggle Rock, and it was just a pleasant surprise for me because we call ourselves rockers, Fraggle Rockers. That in the fan club of the Fraggle Rock Kingdom, we call ourselves Fraggle Rockers. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, now you know. What are we talking about today, Ty?
Fraggle Rock, David Hasselhoff,
Steve Gutenberg,
your desire to have everyone like you in high school.
Oh God, Joseph, I'll never forgive you for that.
The fact that people go deaf when they're firing the 5-inch guns on Fletcher class destroyers. Yeah, just a wide variety. We're covering all of the bases.
And I was going to launch into Joseph and all kinds of jokes about the love you thing, and I didn't do it, and I'm so glad I did because there's anyway. And then we might even talk about episode 601
of what show? Magnum PI.
No, Magnum PI didn't go. Okay, Magnum PI. We'll talk about that. The A-Team.
Did the A-Team go 6 seasons?
I can't imagine it went 6 seasons. I'm guessing 4. 3 or 4. That's what I'm going for.
Because it was like the first 2 seasons, it was huge. It was like the biggest show on TV. Yeah. And then it just sort of like everybody stopped watching it. What's
interesting is sometimes shows come out of the gate and they're enormous successes. Yep. And it's almost sometimes you don't want that. It's so hard to maintain. And a lot of times they fall off real fast. Or there's the shows that are the kind of like the slow builders and then they turn out to be Breaking Bad, which is really cool. Or there's the shows that are just always there.
The biggest version of that, like it's amazing the difference. It was Heroes. The first season of Heroes came out and it was like save the cheerleader, save the world, and everybody was watching Heroes. It was the biggest show on TV, right? It was gigantic. Then it had a really terrible last episode of the first season. And everybody's like, oh, that last episode was bad. And then The second season came out, and literally everyone on Earth stopped watching it. It was like they flipped a switch. It was amazing. I've never seen a show crash that hard in their second season.
You know, the thing about The Expanse is it was one of those shows that was a battle every episode. Like even like going into season 6, I mean, we start off, and I mean, this is a war-torn show at this point. I mean, this is a war movie, the last season, but we were all exhausted because it was right in the middle of the pandemic. But The Expanse in itself was a war. I mean, every season, you know, not knowing what was going to happen or whatever, and you believe in this show, and then everybody knows the story about it getting, you know, going to Amazon. And I think season 4 going into 5 was our only moment to catch a breath.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when we get season 6, so it was just, you know, 7 years of fighting for this show. And then we show up, and then now it's the pandemic. I mean, this season was the least fun for me, the most challenging season that we shot, because what I love about The Expanse, and I've said this many times, but I thrive on our camaraderie. I thrive on us all hanging out afterwards, our rehearsals. But, you know, with the pandemic, we're all shooting in the bubble, and you know, we couldn't even really interact with the crew. The crew comes and they set up, they leave, then we show up, we shoot, then we leave, and the crew shows up. So it took the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, the producers didn't get to produce their episodes like we normally do on set, and the big one, since it was, you know, at least for a little while, it's the last episode, didn't get to do a wrap party, you know, to say goodbye to everybody, right? I mean, we got to do sort of like a version of that when Amazon hosted everybody in LA. And so we all got to get together. We had that party at that restaurant in LA where we kind of bought out the whole restaurant, and that was cool. So we did get something. Amazon did give us something, but that wasn't with the crew. That was just with the cast.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like us and, you know, the producers and the cast. And I think Breck was there, but you know, it wasn't like a real wrap party. You didn't get to say goodbye to all the crew people and stuff.
Yeah. Was Laconia your love letter to Pet Sematary from Stephen King?
No, because it has nothing other than a kid coming back to life. There are no similarities between that and Pet Sematary.
Well, she kills her pet first. I mean, the bird that she loves, and she feeds it and it dies, and then it comes back, and they're not the same. In this, like when they come back with the protomolecule, are they the same?
Well, you'd have to read the last 3 books to find that out.
Well, I have the author here. It all come from your brain, you and Daniel's brain. Are they the same? Like if they come back, are they the same?
That is a topic of conversation in the last 3 books. I'm not going to answer definitively one way or the other because
it's in the last 3 books.
Well, and because
in this episode, when the bird comes back, is it the same?
I mean, it looks the same. It's not evil. So, it doesn't like attack her.
Yeah, so it's not like yeah. Now I'm not saying. Listen, I mean everything. Like that's a compliment. That's a compliment.
No, I know. You're not asking if we ripped off Pet Sematary. I'm just saying people have asked that before, and I'm like, other than the fact that a kid comes. And by the way, stories where a kid comes back to life, there's thousands of them.
Well, I think it's.
I don't know why people latch onto the Pet Sematary
I think
thing.
It starts off with the bird is kind of like a pet, you know, and she was heavily distraught that it died. And then she finds a way to bring it back. It comes back, but it's a little bit different. It's not the same. And then when her brother dies, then she has that idea that she can take that out and she can bring him back. So there are similarities in that. I mean, it's not like it's not on another planet. It's not. But I think that's a compliment. I mean, there's the whole thing about like, oh, it's a little like that. There are no fully original stories.
No, and that's not. I'm not arguing against that at all.
Okay,
all right. I'm not offended by it. I never saw it. Like I never saw that comparison between the two things. People kept asking, like, "Oh, is it like because it's like Pet Sematary?" I'm like, the two stories are nothing alike in my head. I like Pet Sematary, so I'm not like bashing Pet Sematary. And being compared, like you said, being compared to a Stephen King thing is a compliment. So that's not a problem. It's just like I never saw the similarity between the two.
Yeah,
but that happens a lot, though. I mean, like. If the first time you read or saw a story with a certain kind of plot element in it, that becomes in your head, that becomes the story that invented that. So like there's tons of kids who are like in their like 20s who think that The Expanse is copying Mass Effect. And of course it has nothing to do with Mass Effect, but Mass Effect for a lot of kids in their 20s is the first time they really engaged with big galaxy spanning sci-fi space opera.
Yeah.
And so they think Mass Effect invented galaxy spanning sci-fi space opera. Yeah. And it's like, no, it didn't. Mass Effect is like, you know, just the most recent in a long line of galaxy spanning space opera going back.
It's an effect of all the 20s. Operas that it came before it.
Yeah. But the first time you see something, you think that is the thing that invented that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it comes up all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, though, if you think about the concept of Pet Sematary, it would be a nightmare for like teenagers to find out that thing was there. Like, could you imagine like the pranks that you would like if your neighbor's cat dies and you're like, oh yeah, and you go bury it, then watch the cat come back and like try to kill the whole family.
That's not really a prank. That's an attempted murder.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a prank with a cat because a cat can't really. I mean, the cat is small and it can't really kill you. It could just torment you and really terrify you.
It could tear you up. It could tear your eyes out.
But it can't kill you. They're not smart enough to kill you. It's not like they could like plan to run out from your car and your car will run off or whatever. All they can do is attack you, and they're not big enough to really hurt you. They can scratch you and things like that. So, or all right, how about this? If how about this? If you take your neighbor's gerbil and you bury that.
So they're being attacked by their gerbil?
Or if you have a gerbil that dies and you take it to Pet Cemetery, because then you could be like, look at the gerbil, it's evil. And like if you try to come at you and everybody, all your friends be laughing, like drinking, hanging out and everything.
It's got to be a rabbit so it can reenact Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the Holy Grail.
So you Georgia boys, you play different pranks than the pranks I played as a kid. Because you guys, like, attempted murder doesn't seem like a prank to me, but maybe that's a...
It's not. A gerbil can't kill you. A gerbil can't kill you. And, I mean, if you put a rock on its cage, it's not going to get out. But you can see, like, wow, this is an evil gerbil. And, you know, or if you have a gerbil and then you bury it in the pet cemetery and it comes back as evil and you give it as a gift. And they think they got a normal gerbil. And every time they go to feed it, and then you see them the next time, they got Band-Aids all over their hands and their fingers, like, man, that gerbil. And you're like, it was evil. So the Rocinante, we take back in Rocinante, they start off, they're exhausted. What has happened since the finish of the last season and now?
Yeah, well, I mean, we implied that the Rocinante has been doing scouting missions in the belt for months now. And what they're looking for is the thing that they wind up finding, which is how is Marco continuing to launch these rocks at Earth? How are they doing that? And is there a way to stop it? Is there a way to... Because there's hundreds of thousands of objects in the asteroid belt. They're really spread out. They're spread out over a huge area, but there's so many of them, and you can't just search every rock. So you got to kind of follow leads and see if you can figure out where they're coming from. And so where the story picks up is after months of doing this, they find a belter that was doing something to one of the rocks.
Yeah.
And destroy it. And then they go search that rock. And that's when they finally figure out what the belters have been doing to launch these rocks.
So I have a really important question. If you look at like the history of the belters and you look at they're dirty, you look at their haircuts, how did Marco get access to a salon, facial products, and where does he get his facials? Because where I don't see this in belter life.
I think Marco probably travels with a beauty consultant on the ship.
But are there belter beauty consultants? Like, did they sneak it? Like, did they fly down and go to Paris and get like Lemire, like face cream and stuff like that? And they went back up and well, he's been doing a lot of piracy. So he probably pirated a ship that had, Earther beauty products and immediately confiscated that for himself. And has there's probably a closet in the ship that if you open up, it's just floor to ceiling, like hair care products, right?
facial beauty products,
right?
Teeth whiteners,
and he probably stole their hairstylist. As well.
They're beauty consultant. Yeah.
So he has the only hairstylist in the belt. Everybody else has got to cut their own fucking hair, have their buddies cut it, but he has, and it's good to be king.
So we've learned two things about episode 1. We've learned that the Rocinante has been hunting belters, trying to figure out how they're launching these rocks. And we figured out that Marco Inaros has the only hairstylist and beauty consultant
in the belt.
And you know what I love? So we never showed this, but we should have. I should have thought of this. We should have had a scene where Marco's up on the bridge. He's giving orders. He's doing stuff. And then he goes, I have to step away for a little bit. And he goes off the bridge and he gets in the elevator and he goes to a different floor. And then he goes to a different room on his ship on the Pella and goes in. And it's like a full beauty salon. And he gets in the chair. and we could have had Brian do a cameo.
Yeah.
Brian Way.
Oh,
Brian
that would have been great.
Brian comes over with some scissors.
Yeah, but Brian has a chain around his ankle because he can.
Because he's been chained in the beauty salon. He's been chained,
and he's Marco's prized possession.
Yep.
And nobody else is allowed to go because he wants the best.
There's only one chair in there.
There's only one chair, and he wants to have the best hair in the belt. And if anybody gets a better haircut, he kills them right away. Kills them right away.
Yeah. Well, that's part of his campaign of murder.
Yeah.
Is he has to kill everybody who looks better than him. But I would have loved that. Brian's in there cutting his hair and giving him a face. So they're talking about their day.
What a twist of fate. Like if he didn't find that beauty ship and all those beauty supplies, like where would he have been now at that point?
He'd probably still be working on the docks on Palace Station. Yeah.
One of the things that happens in this episode that we learned that Dawes was killed, and like I obviously there's Jared Harris is busy doing a lot of things or whatever, but like the fan in me who was a fan of Anderson Dawes in the fan thing, I was like, God damn, I wish that would have happened on screen, like seen that on screen. But
we actually did. Some behind the scenes stuff here. We actually did have a version of the script that had a Jared Harris scene, and it was a great scene. It was Dawes meeting with Drummer. Mm-hmm. On series and sort of a handing off of the mantle of king from Dawes to Drummer. It was a beautiful scene. I thought it was really well written. Narain had worked on that scene for a long time. I thought it was really good. And we took it out to Jared, and there was just no way. And Jared likes the show and he likes working with us. So it wasn't like a conflict of personality in any way, but there was just no way to make the timing work.
Yeah,
because he was overworking on Foundation, and we would have had to get him, and he was actually working on two things. He was working on Foundation and something else also. Yeah, I think he had a movie that he was working on. I don't remember what it was, but we would have had to get him away from both of those things, and we had it kind of figured out. Manny had sort of figured out a way we could get him out to Toronto for a day, shoot everything we needed to shoot in that one day, and then get him back to where he needed to be. But once it got to that point, then of course the problem becomes to come into Toronto during season 6. There's a 2-week quarantine, so there was no way.
That's what got us is that quarantine.
Yeah. So and Manny was trying to figure out if there was a way he could get around that, like where just bring Jared in, we could shoot him in a green screen in isolation, then comp him into the set. But by the time we're looking at that, it was so complicated. It was such a big deal. It was such an imposition on Jared to make him do all this crap. And the scene's not going to turn out particularly good because it would have been a scene between Dawes and Drummer, but they would have never been in the same set together because in order to get around the quarantine rules, we would have had to shoot all of Jared's scenes in a green box that we could then comp him into whatever set we were going to be using. So we couldn't have had him and Drummer on camera together, right? So we would have jumped through a million flaming hoops, imposed on Jared Harris a great deal, put a huge cost on the production, and we would have done all of that to make a bad scene. And it really was it was a combination of Jared being busy, COVID making everything 10 times harder than it was before. It was just, by the time we figured all of that out, we had sort of a meeting with Narain and Daniel and I, and Dan Nowak, the four of us going, what if we, like, does it kill us if we just lose that scene? And, we came to the conclusion that losing the scene would do less damage to us than trying to keep the scene with all the complications that brought with it. So that's why it wound up that way. It's the reality of making a TV show. There's always things that are out of your control.
The other day I was in my kitchen and we didn't have any, I was starving. And I've been out of town for a long time and we wasn't any groceries and I wanted some eggs and there was no eggs. And I was like, Jen, there's no eggs. And she said, you know what? The grocery store near our house is out and Costco was out of eggs.
Wow.
And Costco was out of eggs. And I remember, and I was sitting there thinking, because I was hungry and I was like, man, I thought about like this episode and I was like, man, we would be fucked. If our food supply, because you don't think about it because the supermarket's always right down the street. So you go pick up your food and you come back. But the fact that there's no eggs at Costco, there's no eggs at Close Thing, like, yeah. And I was thinking, like, I was just standing there helpless and hungry. And I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? And I'm thinking about that scene where Avasarala is standing and it's snowing and she talks about nuclear winter and there's no food chain, there's no crops, there's nothing going on. And man, that would be terrifying. Like, we've gotten so accustomed to our food being so at our fingertips to just not know what to do. Because the thing is when you're hungry, you're fucking hungry. So it's like, somebody's gonna have to learn to hunt and be able to kill something while their stomach is empty. And in that moment, no, it's gonna take, if you're gonna learn to hunt, it's gonna take a little while to learn that. And somebody that's never fished, you're gonna have to go learn how to fish. I
mean, and you can figure those things out, but as you said, it takes some time. And if you're hungry while you're doing it, there's a ticking clock on how long you're going to have to spend on these things, right? Like, at some point, I just need to eat something, and I don't have forever to figure out how to get it. Again, I don't want to sound like a crazy doomsday prepper because I'm not, and I don't think it's going to be political violence that's the problem. I think it's going to be like, I live in the Pacific Northwest. We're a couple 100 miles from the Ring of Fire in the Pacific. When there's a huge earthquake, that's going to knock down some services, right? And you have that idea in your head of, if there's a massive earthquake and suddenly there's no services, do we have a plan? Have we thought about a plan? And really, that's an interesting conversation to have because it fits in so well with what's happening at the beginning of season 6 of the show, which is that where I live, I can dig holes in the ground and those holes are filled with water that I can drink, right? I can walk outside and I'm surrounded by fresh air that I can breathe. There are animals walking through my yard that I can eat. If you're a belter living on Ceres and Marco takes all the food and leaves, which we find out later in the season he has done, there's nowhere to go. It's not like you can, like, oh, well, I'll just go shoot one of the deer that are walking around. There's no deer. There's no air other than what you brought with you. It's not like there's air outside. There's no water other than what you brought with you, right? So it's like, if you take you look at the problem of what would I do if all the services, what would I do if the grocery store was gone? It's that compounded by like 10,000. It's like 10,000 times worse than that, because literally everything that you need to survive comes from somewhere else and you have no way to go get it.
God, I never thought about that. Like, we're talking about here, and again, like, I wasn't really talking about anything political. We just went through that big hurricane, that massive hurricane came through, and when that thing came through, you start thinking about what, because our power, we're out in the country, our power goes out all the time, and it went out yesterday, and so you start thinking about, listen, if another hurricane comes and it hits the right thing, takes out the right power, and there's a few days, whatever, like, it just feels good to be prepared. Your family's going to do it. But I didn't think about, I didn't, like, the fucking belters. One thing that we're talking about that we're taking for granted is oxygen. Yeah. So they have another issue. Like, they don't have water, they don't have food, they don't have oxygen, and they have zero chances of getting that. Yep. That's insane. Like, I could never be a belter. I would be too claustrophobic. I would need the air. Like, you're basically living in a bubble in the middle of space.
Yep.
And that bubble is so fragile, and they spend their whole lives in that. That's intense.
Well, and you start to understand a lot of things about Belter culture when you think about that it is you spend your entire life in fragile bubbles, and if the bubble is ever broken, everybody just dies. So did you ever play Narain's pinball machine?
Yes.
Okay, so Narain Shankar, the showrunner for The Expanse, just for the 7 people who are listening, he had a pinball machine in his office. And it was from a previous show that he had worked on. So for 8 years, Narain worked on a show called CSI, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with. Very famous show. And he had the CSI pinball machine. They gave it to him as a present for being one of the executive producers on the show. So he had the CSI pinball machine in his office. Oh, by the way, Wes, that pinball machine's coming to live at my house.
No.
Yeah, when Narain moves to Vancouver, Canada, he's sending the pinball machine here, so it's going to be down in my bar.
That's awesome because you got so many good memories with that thing, you know.
Exactly. But if you're playing that game, so there was voice actors from the show that would do like lines of dialogue that the pinball machine would say to you. One of those lines of dialogue was William Peterson, who played Grisham, the head of the CSI thing. It's him saying, he says the line, "It's the rule of threes: 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food." And those are the things that will kill you. And so, like we were talking about, water is so much of a more immediate problem than food is. Like, you can go a week without food and you'll be hungry as shit, but you'll be alive. You'll be okay. You can still do stuff. You go 3 days without water, you're dead. You go 3 minutes without air and you're dead. And if you think about how much more of a problem that is, like, if suddenly all the water is gone, you got a day or two to think about it, to figure it out. Like, be like, oh, okay, I could go over here. I could do this thing. I could get water that way. If all of a sudden all of the air is gone, you got about 15 seconds to figure that problem out before you pass out. And then you got about 2 minutes after you pass out before you're dead. It like the level of difficulty goes up so much from water to air.
And that's the thing, is like when people, you know, are like, you know, would you ever want to go up in space? And maybe I would. And like, 10 years ago, I probably would have been all about it. But I think about it, it's like, well, you're not really going to space. You're going to see inside of a spaceship, and you're just going to have cool views out the window. But you're not going to experience anything. You're not going to really, you're just in a spaceship. And then it's like, you know, people are like, oh, we're going to Mars. You're not really going to Mars. You're
going to a cave.
Yeah, you're going to a cave
on Mars.
It's not like you can walk around and really take in Mars, or going to the moon. You're not really taking it in. There's always something between you and the moon. So, you know, like being in space, I don't know, I guess the moon's cool because you can walk around in a suit or whatever. But being in space, it's like you can see an insane view. But I can look up, I can go outside right now and see an insane view. So it's like, I could just see the spaceship when it's in port, walk around or whatever, and I can see the views in my night sky. I don't need to go up in space and do that whole thing. So our top 5 is war movies. You want to do those?
Are we done talking about the episode?
I think so. we covered.
I would like to say the one thing I would like to mention is that this first episode launches the rest of the season in that we finally have a mission. We know how Marco's launching the rocks. We figured it out. And we think we know the control that he's doing it from. And so we get this launch of the rest of the Rocinante story for the season comes from this episode. But at the same time, we're also launching the Earth story because we have a Vasarala on Earth talking about the problem we have with food. Ceres is going to have its food problem, but Earth has its food problem as well. We see her at the farm. We see her going, this used to grow so much grain, and now it's just a wasteland because of these rocks that Marco is dropping on us. So really, we're going to be talking about season 2 in the near future. I wanted to make sure that, we're talking about all this stuff in episode 1, that episode 2 is going to just take off like a rocket because of the setup that we're doing in this episode.
How is he slinging the rocks? And how are they... How are they going to the right place? So
he has, that's going to be next episode. In episode 2, we'll talk about that. But what we learn in episode 1 is that he's taking these old spaceship engines, these old drives from spaceships that they're not using anymore, and he's basically sticking them on the side of these rocks and then using the engine and the navigation system that they've set up to push the rocks out of orbit into an orbit that is going to intersect with the Earth. That's how he's doing it.
Where did you get the idea from that?
I mean, the idea of throwing rocks at the Earth is a pretty old one. I mean, I think the first time I read about it was Moon is a Harsh Mistress. It's one of the Heinlein juvenile. They call him the Heinlein juveniles. He wrote all these books in the 60s that were like intended to be read by a younger audience. It was one of those.
Now, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, NordVPN. Ty and I have been using NordVPN to protect our devices from malware. Who likes malware? Malware is everywhere, and we need protection from malware. And we also like to stream our movies and TV shows like The Expanse, traveling abroad. And stop getting those annoying pop-up ads. I hate those pop-up ads. NordVPN can even help you organize all your passwords and provides threat protection by automatically blocking suspicious websites. NordVPN is giving Ty and That Guy listeners a special deal if you sign up using our link. Grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to nordvpn.com/TATG to get a huge, it's going to be huge, discount off our NordVPN plan plus 4 months for
free.
It's completely risk
free
with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/TATG to get a discount off your plan and 4 months for
free.
All right, here's our war movies.
Yeah. So season 6 of the show is definitely, Daniel, when we wrote the book, we talked about it as like us ripping off War and Peace and doing a worse version of it. And it definitely, season 6 is that sort of War and Peace kind of season where it is about this massive war between these 3 competing powers, the lives that are torn apart by that, the love stories that can come up in war. Like, it's all of those things. And the best war movies, I think, are a mix of all of that. The best war movies cannot just be about the war. The best war movies have to be about the way that the war affects people back home and the soldiers who are in it and the people who love those soldiers and how that affects them. And so for me, the top 5 has to be that mix of all of those elements. I really liked Hurt Locker, but Hurt Locker, other than a couple of scenes, almost kind of ignores the at-home part of it, right? There's the one scene where he goes home and he discovers he's not good at home, so he goes back to war again.
Well, what do you think about Platoon? Because that would be on my list, and there's none of the home front in that. But what you do see is people fresh from the world, and you see the psychological breakdown that war has on them, and you see who it turns them into afterwards.
And I think Platoon, I think Platoon walks that line by, as you said, the fresh people who are new to the war, experiencing it for the first time, and Charlie Sheen's character, his letters to his grandmother, talking about the war and his experience of it. Plus, I also think the thing Platoon does really well, that all war movies try to do this, and the best ones are the ones that do it well, which is to show how the soldiers are going to create a family. And the way that Platoon does that is this sort of the evil and the good as represented by
Barnes and
Sergeant Barnes and who's the Willem Dafoe character?
Elias.
Yeah. So there's Sergeant Barnes and Sergeant Elias, and how they become father figures to the soldiers in that platoon. And each is kind of pulling the soldiers in a different direction, right? There's the one who's trying to go through the war and keep his humanity and keep the humanity of the soldiers under him. And Sergeant Barnes, who's like all in on the war. Fuck these guys. We're going to kill them all. And if you're not like me, you're a pussy and you deserve to die.
Well, if you're not like me, you're not going to survive.
You're not going to make it.
Yeah. You got to harden your heart and you gotta chill your blood, because if you're not like me, you're not gonna survive.
And I think Platoon really successfully creates that family dynamic through those characters,
because Elias still has his humanity and his empathy.
Yeah.
And, and he bring people gravitate towards him, and they host those underground bunker parties where they're smoking weed and drinking, and, and it's like they have the music and they're kind of still connected to the real world, the life. But then Barnes, you see them, it's like he's drinking, it's dark, it's cold. But also, you see like Charlie Sheen in the beginning, his character in the letters, you see that he's an idealist, and that he was a kid with money, that he could have went to college, and he didn't understand why these kids that were poor were going off to die when he could go off to college. And so he decided to do his part and join up. And at the end, he was completely ruined, completely ruined by the war. I think it's Oliver Stone's one of his best films.
I would say that it's also Oliver Stone's most personal film.
Yeah.
So Narain will always say that everybody has one movie that in them that is the movie of their heart.
Yeah.
And so, so like a lot of directors will make one movie that's brilliant and then never quite do it again. And Narain will say the reason for that was the movie that they have spent their whole life writing, that they've spent their whole life thinking about.
Yeah.
I think, and I don't think Oliver Stone only had one movie in him. He's made a lot of good movies, but this I think was his most personal.
To second your point, I think Platoon is such a powerful movie because it's like he's opening up his diary and just bearing his soul of that. And it's heartbreaking.
I mean, I think it's clear that, and I think this is true for a lot of people who have suffered in times of war, that those things become sort of the defining event of your life. The thing that sort of colors everything that comes afterwards. And I think watching this, that's definitely feels true of Oliver Stone, that it was the Vietnam War is one of the most defining moments of his life. And he's been talking about that war in different ways ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's a very powerful movie. And if you wanted it on the top 5, I would definitely not disagree with you.
I would put it on the top 5.
I mean, I love Das Boot. I don't know if I would put it in the top 5. Joseph put the Das Boot up there, and I'm just talking about that. I think I love Full Metal Jacket, but I think it's two different movies that just kind of get jammed together. It's a very strange movie.
And I've said this in the podcast before, that the boot camp scene is the most authentic, realistic boot camp scene I've seen in any film, and it blows my mind every time I see it. And it's so powerful and it's so good. And that boot camp sequence, to me, regardless of the second half of the film. But what's interesting is, like, I remember first watching it as a kid, and being kind of touched, feeling like, I guess this says, what this says about my psychology, but I was touched when Lee Ermey was saying, wow, you found something you're good at, you've been born again hard. And I was like, I felt good that he was.
Yeah, you're rooting for him now.
I'm rooting for him. And I felt good that he was becoming somebody that Gunnery Sergeant Hartman
is proud of,
respected and proud of. And he came a long way. And look, that could have been, we've seen those movies, where the guy, and it's just like Kubrick had something else to say, that no, this guy was like fucking brainwashed and all this. And like when he pushed him too hard and he went to the dark side, I was like devastated by that. But the thing is, that movie made me think, because I would have been proud, and I would have been like, those kind of guys, I would want his respect. I would want his pride. And so anyway, for that, the is passionate, and as much as we talked about right now and how it affected us, I think it goes on the list.
I don't disagree. I mean, it doesn't have much to say about the home life and what's going on back home. But I think all this stuff you're just talking about there, and the found family aspect of it, because I mean, Joker, when he gets to Vietnam, he's so excited to find Cowboy and hook back up with him, and that sense of family between the two of them for having gone through boot camp together. And I mean, spoiler alert, but when Cowboy dies, it's devastating. Like it just breaks your heart, because these two guys feel like brothers.
What a great group of actors. Great, really talented young actors.
Yeah, incredibly talented. And R. Lee Ermey went from there to being in everything because everybody took one look at that movie and said, holy shit, this guy's amazing. Let's put him in everything now.
Yeah.
And not just in war. I mean, he did a lot of war movies and he played a lot of soldiers and he played a lot of sergeants, but he also, like, he was the dad in American Beauty. You know, I mean, like he played some serious dramatic roles after that, that he was great.
Yeah, he's naturally,
Yeah, so he was a gifted
something
guy.
I saw him in recently and I was like, God damn, he's good in this. And it was off brand. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, he was a gifted guy. It was a real loss when he died recently. And I would say it's not a movie, but I would say that I think the single greatest film depiction of a war and what it's like to be a soldier in a war and what it's like. Yeah, he's putting it on Band of Brothers.
Band of Brothers, that's the thing. Yeah.
Because it is about the home life. It's about the families. It's about the soldiers in the field. It's about the officers that those soldiers have to obey and what that's like. And it compares and contrasts good officers versus bad officers and what a difference that makes in a soldier's life. Band of Brothers is the best war thing ever made.
Yeah,
without question.
How many times have you seen the whole thing?
Probably 4 or 5.
Yeah,
like I went through a stretch there where I'd watch it every year. Where I'd be looking at the things that are available on HBO, and I'd be like, Band of Brothers. Well, I guess I'm just watching that again. You know.
So you went through beginning to end probably 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. And that's 8 hours. I mean, it's like an 8-hour thing.
Yeah, and the thing is like that is such an indication of how great something is. Yeah. You know, I think about all the stuff that's out there, the percentages of the time you could spend watching so many different things, and out of that, you took this one project and you watched. You know, you gave 8 times 5. You know, you watched that much. That's that's a testament to how great that show was.
Well, and I think Dick Winters is one of the most fascinating characters in a TV show ever. And then you see the interviews with the actual Dick Winters, and he's a real guy. The fascinating life that you're seeing, which seems like a movie life, there's the real guy. He's sitting right there, and he actually did all of those things.
Well, wait, where was that? Did you see, like, was there like a box set, or like, where did you see this?
No. So Band of Brothers starts with interviews of the 101st.
Yeah.
And so they're doing interviews of the actual guys, you know, and one of the guys they're interviewing is Dick Winters.
No, but I thought you might have had like more, like you saw like a longer form.
I have actually seen more interviews with him because after Band of Brothers came out, a lot of people wanted to interview him.
Okay,
and so there's been a lot of interviews, and you can find them on YouTube or wherever of all these interviews with Dick. He's the guy that you see in the show. He's self-effacing. He doesn't take the credit for things. He always gives the credit to the soldiers that he worked with, which is the character that's being portrayed on the screen in that show. And you realize, holy shit, this was just a real guy. He was in some of the most pivotal moments in World War II. He was right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did the things that were, you know, because you're watching the show and like nobody could have done all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's too many heroic moments. It's too many like world-changing moments that this guy is right in the middle of. That's not real.
It's like Audie Murphy, you know.
It's like Audie Murphy. Then you see the interviews. You're like, holy shit! No, it's real. That guy was actually there.
Yeah.
He actually did all of those things. And like, how many humans like that have ever existed in the history of the world? There's a few, but it's not that many. So the reason Das Boot is on there, I was talking to Joseph about this earlier, and I don't think it should be in the top 5. But as far as its connection to The Expanse, is when I was building out The Expanse with Daniel, submarine warfare greatly informed warfare in The Expanse, because you're in a little metal bubble filled with air. Everything outside of that bubble wants to kill you, and the people inside the bubble are the only people who can save you. You can't be saved from outside.
Well, then it should go on the top 5 because it was one of your inspirations for The Expanse.
I mean, it definitely, Das Boot had a huge effect on me when I saw it as a kid. And it definitely informs how I think of warfare in space, for sure.
Are you a Saving Private Ryan fan?
I mean, I like Saving Private Ryan.
Did you enjoy 1917 more?
I enjoyed 1917. I think it's a technical marvel. I think it's an astonishingly crafted film.
You're a big Enemy of the Gates fan.
I am a big Enemy of the Gates. So the thing with Dunkirk is very cold.
Yeah.
It's very sort of, it's presenting the things that's happening, but I had a hard time emotionally connecting with it.
Yeah, Nolan is like the new Kubrick. That's one of my things with Kubrick. Kubrick is like a brilliant filmmaker, but it's just so cold.
It can be very cold. Yeah.
Humanity.
Saving Private Ryan has some really brilliant stuff in it, and it's a beautifully made movie, and Spielberg is a god. But I think he has the tendency to get a little maudlin, to get a little sappy. And I think Saving Private Ryan suffers from that. He gets a little sappy in places.
Yeah.
That kind of knocks me out.
I don't mind a little maudlin. Like I think I have a little bit of that in me. Like I don't mind it. I mean, there are times, but I don't mind it. But I understand what you're saying, you know.
So Enemy at the Gates is not a great movie. It's a movie I enjoy a great deal, and I've rewatched it multiple times. But the thing that Enemy at the Gates does that we've been talking about is, as a war movie, it shows you the effect on those wars' effect on everybody, because they're all right there. Like the soldiers that are fighting and the civilians that they're trying to protect are literally like 10 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not like, you watch like a World War II movie, especially for Americans.
Yeah.
None of our civilians were at threat, right? Like we took our soldiers, we put them in boats, we sent them across the ocean. A lot of them fought and died in some other country. But if they lost that war, it wasn't like the civilian right next to them was going to get killed.
Yeah.
You watch Enemy at the Gates, the soldiers are out fighting the Germans. They're going back and they're having dinner at this lady's house who's like cooking them potato soup in her kitchen. That is an experience of war that Americans have not had in over 200 years.
Yeah, that's what fascinates me about World War I, like trench warfare. Yeah. The fact that like the Christmas truce, like just blows my mind. And that you could be sitting there smoking. It's like you're let's take a break from killing each other, smoke a cigarette, read a letter, and literally you could throw a football and hit like a whole line of people that are going to try to kill you in like 20 minutes after they finish their lunch. And then the Christmas truce just blows my mind that happened. You know, it's like it's crazy that something like that could happen.
And it reminds you that the people who fight in these wars, and the best war movies make this very clear, they're humans.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're soldiers. Yeah, they're there to do this very violent job, but they're humans first. And this idea that a bunch of humans go, hey, maybe we should not kill each other because it's Christmas. I can see that. Like that makes sense to me that humans would do that, right? And there's plenty of stories of like soldiers from opposing sides wind up in the same trench together, or wind up in the same bomb crater together, and just decide not to kill each other.
Yeah.
You know, because you can see the guy, he's right there. You can see how scared he is. You know how scared you are. Yeah. And suddenly you feel this overwhelming sympathy.
Yeah.
Of like, I'm terrified right now. I can tell he's terrified right now. Maybe we just don't kill each other.
Yeah. You know, I would want to nominate two documentaries. And one is the Peter Jackson documentary, the World War I one.
Oh, where they will not grow old, or what's the name of it?
That blew my mind.
It is a mind-blowing documentary.
It is mind-blowing, and in the whole thing, but that really does a great job of the home front and what like there's these great quotes when they're going. It's like, it would, like, people talk, they said honestly it was an adventure. Like it was like they were going on the boats and be like, this is the most fun thing we've ever done, and and exciting.
Well, give it a minute.
Yeah, and then they get there and it's just so horrific, and the landscape. I mean, it's like it looks like hell. You are living in hell.
There are portions of France that when you watch actual footage from World War I, there are portions of the front in France that literally look like Mordor from like Lord of the Rings,
right?
Where it's just craters and smoke and gas
and ash,
corpses,
and wet,
and blood and corpses scattered around, and it's just like you look at that and you're like, I can't believe humans turned because that's like some of that's like Alsace in France. It's some of the most beautiful countryside in the world. And and you look at it, and in World War I, and it is just Mordor. It is just you expect orcs to come running over the hill. Yeah.
And then and the fact that it's in color and you can hear them talk, it's just it's mind blowing. And I would say the Ken Burns Vietnam documentary, nothing has moved me like that. I mean, my dad was a vet, and I watched that during. I would come home from The Expanse when we were working on The Expanse, and I would watch it at night when I came home, and I would nothing has brought that emotion up for me like this did. I mean, it is a really
I'm fine with both of those. I think they're both incredibly powerful. And what I like about both of them is they present the reality of war almost without judgment. They just say, here's what war is. Here's the reality of it. And not leaning to either side of like being, I mean, I think anytime you look at war realistically, it feels anti-war because war is a horrible thing. But both of them just sort of presenting it without any commentary. Just here's the reality of what was happening. Here's what it is. And I think that's more powerful than propaganda. Much more powerful than propaganda is to just present it.
The Pearl Harbor thing on Netflix that I think it's called, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a Pearl Harbor documentary. I went to Pearl Harbor when I was in Hawaii just recently.
Yeah.
But there's a documentary on it, and the Japanese pilots that were involved in the Pearl Harbor bombing are being interviewed.
Yeah.
In there, and they're like, we were just trying to kill as many Americans as we could. We thought they all thought they were going to die.
Yeah.
And that's pretty powerful. Minute by minute, that's what it is.
Well, and have you ever seen what is the name of it? It's the little documentary about the one group of soldiers in Afghanistan at the single forward operating base.
Yeah, it's Restrepo.
Yeah, Restrepo. Thank you. Yeah. That's the name of it. That one is fascinating because they're basically a bunch of 20-year-olds, 19 and 20-year-olds out in the middle of fucking nowhere in Afghanistan, surrounded by people who want to kill them.
Right.
And there are moments in there where like they're shooting down the hill at some guys who are attacking, and like they're cheering. They're like, they hit a guy and they're like, he goes down, and they're like, yeah, I got him. And they're like so happy. And I remember talking to a guy I used to know who was super like hardcore pro, like, yeah, let's fucking kill those guys. Like that kind of sort of one-sided view of what war is. And he's like, I watched Restrepo. Those guys were stoked when they were killing people. All this bullshit about like war messes people up. That's all bullshit. I'm like, the thing is, you watch Restrepo and then you read, you find those same guys who were in that documentary and you read about their lives after they left. All of them had PTSD. All of them went through really deep psychological trauma for that. So the thing that these documentaries let you do is see both sides. Like, you're talking about in World War I, the guys who are like, this is an adventure. I'm getting on a boat. I'm going to France. That'll be fun. But then you see the other side of it where you're in a muddy trench and your feet are rotting off of you and your buddy just got shot in the head by a sniper.
Yeah.
And suddenly it's not an adventure anymore. These sorts of documentaries really present a view of war I'm profoundly grateful for, because it really does show it. But at the same time, also shows the incredible camaraderie. And, when you're watching stuff about World War II, those guys really felt like they were doing something important. They were doing something that mattered. And they felt like they were saving the world, So you get to see all sides of it. I really am very suspicious of any war thing that only presents one side of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's our top 5.
And I was actually talking to Joseph about this before you came on. This should not go on this list. It's not a great movie, but there's a movie on Apple TV called Greyhound about the destroyers that were on convoy protection in World War II during the battle for the Atlantic. And it's got Tom Hanks. It's a very well-made film. It's beautiful looking. I think it's a very well-made thing, but it is a very simple story. It is one destroyer trying to protect a convoy. A wolf pack of German subs shows up, and then just that, like the 24 hours where they're fighting those subs. So it's not, it's not a ton of story in there. It's just this one thing. But it had a profound impact on me because that was the kind of destroyer my grandfather served on in World War II. And he was a gun captain in one of the 5-inch 38 gun mounts. So that movie, they never go inside the gun mount. They show Tom Hanks shouting orders like, all 5-inch mounts, fire as you bear, like that kind of stuff is happening. So, there are guys inside that mount loading that gun and firing it during that whole battle. And I'm watching that happen, and I'm just sitting there thinking, so my grandfather, who I knew and loved, I'm thinking he was in there. He was in one of those gun mounts. In some of the biggest naval battles in the history of the world, he was inside of one of those little metal coffins, directing the gun, getting the gun loaded, firing where the captain told them to fire, trying to hit the targets that they're supposed to hit, and every second knowing that the enemy's doing the same thing, that there can be torpedoes in the water dropped by, Japanese, torpedo bombers, and that, because he was in the Pacific, not the Atlantic, but, that a Japanese cruiser could be firing, 12-inch shells at them. And any minute now, one of those shells can just come through the side of your little metal coffin and blow you and all your friends off this world. And just watching that movie and getting to see some little taste of what that war was like for my grandfather had a profound effect on me. Yeah. And the reason I mentioned that is because you were talking about watching the Ken Burns documentary and thinking of your father who was over there in Vietnam. Yeah.
And it floored me.
Well, I actually watched a documentary not too long ago. I think it's on Netflix about the battle for Chosun Reservoir in Korea.
That's on Netflix?
I think so.
What's the name
think it's
of
on
it?
Netflix. I don't remember, but it's black and white. I'll look it up. I'll email you afterwards. I'll look it up. But that's the battle where my uncle got almost killed and came home 90% disabled. That was the battle. So, I mean, I didn't see him, but like the whole time I was watching, I kept expecting my uncle to walk past.
Yeah.
Like he was there. He was at that battle. He was one of those guys. And getting to see what he experienced, what it was like for him. I mean, like a tiny piece of it, obviously, you don't get the full experience, but that stuff is really powerful when you've had people that that were in those situations and you get to see.
Alrighty. That's our list.
I'm done ranting.
All right, listen, I would say like and subscribe, but I was responsible and I said that at the beginning, and I just want to take a minute to pat myself on the back. I think that's the first time we remembered saying that at the beginning. Listen, Ty and that guy Army, I love you guys. I love spending time with you. Thank you for your support. God damn it. Thank you for being you. Say goodbye, Ty.
Goodbye, Ty.